podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, as I said, we share a common bond in our work and passion for helping the autistic community, the neurodiverse community. We all have personal connections, personal stories, but I wanted to learn about your work, what you're doing, your background, what drove you to your work, and how really we can communicate better with the neurodiverse community and help them be successful in their goals.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate your personal motivation, your passion for this subject. Like you, I'm a parent, and that is probably my initial motivation, what drives me each day in my own work. So to give you a bit of background, how did I get into this very unique opportunity, this role, this startup nonprofit organization? So if we, run the proverbial clock back about 4 years, I was at that point a parent, employed with a non-governmental organization, worldwide organization, and as parent of 3 diagnosed autistic persons, I was constantly looking for answers, support, anything that I could find that would help my own children and others that I began to make connections with in the autistic community and beyond. And was constantly having dialogue with a lot of parents of autistic persons and trying to help sort of intercede, problem solve as I could, even at that point before I began my work. And so I had an opportunity present itself where I left the role that I was with the large international organization. And I thought to myself, well, why not just jump back in something else? And then it began to occur to me that what if at this crossroads moment, I could do something different? I could invest myself in a place where I think that the needs of many people were, calling out. And so I began to do my background research and putting together my organizational concept. And what I discovered was, as I began to research, and the more I dug into researching outcomes, life outcomes for autistic persons in the United States and beyond, worldwide, was the outcomes are frankly, and still to this day, fast forward 4 years, tragic.
Yeah.
They're startling.
Yeah.
So the numbers of autistic adults who experience each day chronic depression, anticipatory and other anxiety, sensory overload, and we can talk about that in a minute. Unemployment. The unemployment rate has been researched many times over. The most recent research that we've been able to find places autistic adults somewhere between 70 and maybe even as high as 90%. Now, that includes soft unemployment or soft employment. So you see people going from job to job to job, never really finding anything to any place to stay. And then finally, the one that's the most sobering to me, and there's been some research on it fairly recently. I know the Johnson Foundation had some research on it that shows that the suicide rate for autistic individuals is around 9 times the national average.
Wow.
So, you don't see that on the news.
No.
But it's there. And we find autistic adults slipping away. By the time autistic adults reach the age of 19, 20, 21 years of age, all the services, and I have some problems with some of the services that are available, but the services that are available are drying up.
Right.
They're just not available to autistic adults after that stage. So what we find is autistic adults are just sort of left out. Right. Many parents who are aging parents are trying to provide for these autistic adults, but there's no place for them to go. And so I was stopped in my tracks and sobered by that research as I did it, and I endeavored to do something different. I thought something radical had to be done, and it had to be done right away. And so I formulated the idea of putting together a person-to-person life coaching, job coaching organization that would specifically address the needs of autistic and other neurodivergent adults. So I decided to address that head on. It was interesting too. I just remember fondly having several conversations with business colleagues when I launched the organization. They would say, "What do you do?" And I say, "Well, I do life coaching." And I was almost able to finish my sentence before they'd say, "Oh yeah, we know lots of people who do that." And then I would say, "For autistic adults."
Yeah.
And they would say, "Okay, well, I've never heard of anyone ever doing that."
Right.
So encouraging news is that now, 4 years later, there are some individuals and groups doing that, which I've cheered on. Right. But I formulated what I wanted to do with this organization around what I call E3. So E3, and that methodology powers everything that we do with our organization. And our organization is finally growing. So I'm excited to report that. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But this E3, the concept, the first E is to engage. Right. Every day, every hour, myself, my volunteers, board members, colleagues, those that I can grab hold of, anybody out there, we seek to build bridges of engagement for autistic adults. Mm-hmm. And here's where I want to stress that every autistic adult that we work with, that we've served over 4 years, the many people who have come into our sphere, we've helped to guide on that journey and go, is unique. Right. I'll repeat, they are unique. Right. There are far too many times that we discover this sort of cookie cutter approach to autistic persons. Right. Well, sort of what one works for one will work for all. Absolutely untrue. Yeah. And I think that kind of methodology, that kind of thinking interferes greatly with our ability to really provide great support and transitional service for autistic adults. So we're constantly looking for avenues for engagement for autistic persons. Everything we do is strength-based in philosophy. We do not subscribe to deficit thinking, which frankly is pervasive. Right. And has been pervasive for over 70 years. Right. So through medicine, through psychiatry, through therapies, that idea that autistic persons are broken has been pervasive, and it's unfortunately warped our best efforts to help autistic persons. So engagement. Secondly is equipping. Right. Equipping is we look for opportunities to engage autistic persons with life skills. But here again, I want to stress, not every life skill is necessary for everyone. Right. I could tell you stories of historical figures who we know now, a little bit of late date diagnosis. We know now probably were on the autism spectrum themselves, who didn't learn certain life skills, and they did amazing things for the world and for civilization. But where needed, we want to engage people with life skills, and also around the idea that we believe in interdependent living. Right. Interdependent living. I did not say independent living. Yeah, right. Right. I joke with people and sometimes in my articles and videos and things that there probably somewhere is someone who is an independent living person. They're probably hunting moose right now up along the Canadian Rockies. Right. They don't need anybody. Right. Well, you and I and many others, we need people. Right. We have communities, we have systems, we have grocery stores, and so on. Thirdly is encouragement. Right. Every day, myself and other life coaches and organizations, we work with the most discouraged, disconnected, and oftentimes chronically depressed people you ever want to know. Right. And And that haunts me and that drives me. So every day I make sure that we are an encouraging presence for autistic persons. Everyone we engage with and the families and parents that we serve, we want to encourage them in their own life journey. So that's our methodology. It drives everything we do with our work with autistic adults. And so, in the last 4 years since we established our 501c3 charitable nonprofit, LifeGuides for Autistics, if you're going to look it up, it's a foundation for LGFA, which stands for LifeGuides for Autistics. We call ourselves NeuroGuides. Right. And all of our coaches are NeuroGuides life coaches. And we have seen, I could go on all day, but I'll let you ask some questions. Sure. We have seen transformational life journeys in the people we have worked with. So I'm going to stop there and see if you have any questions for me.
Well, the questions are racing through my head as a parent, as a recipient of those social services, as an observer, as so many things could have been done better, but instead of waiting on the sidelines, you took charge. As many parents have, they've had to become their own expert, right? They've started foundations, charities, businesses, all meant to pick up one aspect of the failing institutions around us that have failed our kids in order to drive it forward and really change the thinking. I think you mentioned cookie cutter and I've heard that from so many parents, from so many entrepreneurs, from so many people involved. A doctor said, I felt my son was warehoused in a place, right? Every single parent I talked to had the same feeling, that the social institutions, maybe they're individually good people. I don't think they got into it to provide a disservice to the community, right? I don't believe that. I think they are trying to help, but they got caught up in the institution and the bureaucracy, and they've lost why they were doing what they were doing. So this organization that you've invested 4 years of your life to build sounds amazing. And I want to know, how do people find you? How do people come to you? And is it only limited to groups in the city that you're in, or is it really a broader appeal, a range?
Yeah, we, 3.5 years ago, I was contacted by the editor of Costco magazine, and it was unexpected. And he said, how would you like a free advertising piece in Costco magazine? And, I think I have a Costco membership, and I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And I said, well, I was trying to be polite, but I said, well, what's your readership? Who might see it? And he said, well, we have a readership of about 17 million. And I thought, that's not bad.
That's not bad, yeah.
So we ran a piece in April of that year. I think that maybe 2017, 2018. And I was surprised. I thought because it was Autism Awareness Month that would be sandwiched somewhere in the with all the other ads for large organizations, but we were the only ones.
Wow.
And so we were deluged with calls and emails and things like that. Wow. And we still have a couple of clients that we work with each week based on that. So that was the only actual formal advertising we've done. Wow. We get probably 5 or 6 inquiries a day now. And those are primarily word of mouth, and based on the work we've done with families, with individuals. So I don't know what would happen if we advertised. So
that's about all you can handle, right? 5 or 6 a day.
Well, we're growing. We're adding on training new NeuroGuides life coaches now, and so we've got some very exciting things happening. So we have made impact, and we've seen impact, and we've seen transformational things. I want to address something you mentioned earlier, and that is this idea of how do we change things? How do we change systems? And I think you and I are both in agreement that it's through the code within the system.
Right.
You want to address that code.
Right.
One of the challenges that we have, it's not just a challenge, it's huge, it's mountainous.
Right.
It is this idea of deficit model thinking.
Right.
It's not just about strengths, which we promote, and weaknesses. It's deeper than that. It's at a core level. So 70 years ago, approximately, maybe 80 at this point, it actually is, when the first diagnostics began for autistic persons. You know, the word ism is only roughly 100 years old now. But 70 years ago, when the first diagnostics began, and then developed from there, we saw the medical and the psychiatric communities. And I think, and I want to say here, I believe there are lots of well-meaning people, and it's wonderful. But what developed from that was this idea that autistic persons, who were then discovered at that point, and although who had always been here, were looked at as needing to be fixed.
Right.
So they were created under a medical and psychiatric model, which said, if we give them therapies, if we give them pills, if we do these things for them, we can fix and cure even their autism, which is a terrible idea because autism is a neurological condition or variance. It is quite literally the way your brain is wired.
Right.
You're not going to cure yourself from it. You're not going to get over it. And there are some profound, unique, and amazing things about autistic persons that should be embraced. I'm going to pause here and say something very important for your listeners and viewers. I understand very clearly that there are a minority of autistic persons who are cognitively disabled.
Sure.
There are intellectual disabilities, IDD. I understand that clearly. And for those autistic persons, more support is needed, sometimes even lifetime support. And I understand that clearly. But it's so important that people understand that the majority of autistic persons on Earth are not cognitively disabled.
Right.
They're very misunderstood. They're very disconnected, but there is a path forward for them and their unique neurology. Right. But we've lived under that model. We've lived under that deficit model, and that is the code at the center of this. I'm excited to say that that is changing. I had conversations about a year and a half ago with some students who were studying psychiatry, and they just sort of bubbled out that, David, we just wanted to tell you that what you're talking about, what you're teaching, what you're demonstrating is now being taught to us. That old deficit model is drying up and disappearing. So change is coming, and it's sea change. Right. It's just not here yet. The best we can do is educate parents, and to tell parents, I believe, that to question, to look to solid research, to look to, most importantly, people in the autistic community who are actually autistic, discover their perspectives, discover their unique approach, discover them, and you'll discover and unlock the lock with the key to your own situation.
Right. You know, I think most parents, when they become parents in that very sensitive time period in a person's life, they're vulnerable. They're scared, they're uncertain, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety about, does my kid have 10 toes and 10 fingers, right? Is everything okay? So you're primed for looking for faults. It's our nature, right? Especially with more science and the tests that you do in prenatal times, you are seeking faults. And it's hard to undo that, but then even afterwards, when you do begin to notice changes in your child and it does move towards a diagnosis of autism, there is a grieving period. for most normal parents who are ill-equipped and don't have the, I want to say, maturity or the resilience that autistic parents have, because we've dealt with so much and we've, it's easy. I could go back to 13 years ago when my son was born and I was a rookie. I didn't know anything. I always say parents, kids don't come with a manual, and special needs kids especially don't come with a manual. So you're completely in uncharted waters. You only have perhaps unsolicited advice from family or pseudo experts to say, oh no, it's X or Y or what have you. So a lot of folks that I talk to are paving the way in trying to actually take care of the parents, the support unit early on, make sure they don't crack under the pressure, make sure they're prepared on the right path, which is really supporting your child in whatever they want to be, whether they're on the special needs spectrum or not. You shouldn't really brand your kid as, I want that kid to be what I want that kid to be. I want them to be the best they can be, whatever it is. If it's not Harvard, that's okay. If it's community college, if it's a job bagging groceries at Ralph's, it's okay. You're happy, you're healthy, you're loved. What else is there? Don't complicate life with more baggage than life already gives your kid when they're born.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And I would go far as to say, letting go of those preconceptions, as you said, is critical. Right. One of the challenges that we face is that there is that, as you mentioned, that vulnerable moment, right, for parents. I've been there.
Right.
Personally, I remember sitting in a room with my shrieking first child, who every time you open the windows and let that light come in, was shrieking. Every time a noise, a pin would drop, something was highly uncomfortable, and no one knew what to do. And I understand today that was sensory processing integration disorder, SPD. I was not able to see it then because I was not aware of it. And I know now that not only my own kids, but every autistic person that I've worked with has experienced some level of sensory processing integration disorder. I see it now, and I know how to help them adjust to it. But at that moment, right? At that moment when we, as you mentioned, the word grieving process, I think that we're growing as a culture, as a civilization, as community. And I believe that we're coming to a place where we understand that to have an autistic child is not worthy of grief.
Right.
That it is a simple but important neurological difference. Right. And again, I restate, if there are cognitive disabilities, we can work with that. But for the many who are simply autistic, they are longing for and calling out to be understood. I had a visit with a new client recently, and the first thing he did was trying to tell me all the wonderful things that he had done. He had achieved this, he had done this, this long list of showing that his behaviors were good and that he could be a great citizen and a great, and on. And I remember looking at him and asking him about who he was, and sharing that moment where I began to challenge his pre-built model of assumptions. And within maybe 10 minutes, we were having a fantastic conversation. All the guards were being lowered. Right. All the behavioral mechanisms that he had been taught and trained in were all being discarded. And it was powerful. Right. to see, it's that I see you, right, moment. Right. And that's one of the great joys of my work is discovering the actuality, the presence of people.
Right. And it's funny, the other thing I've realized in my unsophisticated journey as a parent is understanding how your child communicates is different than what you think communication should be. So my other son, we obviously exchange words, and there's other what we would accept as normal social behavior. And my special needs son doesn't speak. He is cognitively,
Non-speaking.
he's not speaking, and he is cognitively disabled. But he is just a bundle of joy. He's just a 13-year-old, kind of acts like a 2-year-old. But for those parents that always wish that their baby could remain a baby, guess what? We have that. So
right?
he hugs and kisses, comes to you, just a big baby, and loves affection, holds your hand all the time. So of course he's different, and he's only one, as they say, when you met one kid with autism, you met one kid with autism. So that is his way of relating to us. But the fact that the way we connect is different than what most people connect. So we may just come stand next to each other and hold hands. He won't look at me. He'll be close to me in proximity, and that's where we're connecting. It doesn't always result in, obviously, eye-to-eye contact and the type of, I want to say, visual satisfaction that most parents, especially young parents, are longing for. So understand.
And I appreciate what you're saying. I really do, because it's that parental bond. It's that warmth, that emotive connectivity, and the ability to see beyond limitations and to a discovery process of how best to communicate. One thing you just mentioned is this eye contact. For many years, we've carried the weight of that. That cultural presupposition, that expectation that you must make eye contact to be successful, whatever you want to call it, is so important. Most of the autistic adults that I work with do not like making eye contact. Now, they are fully present. They are taking in a lot of information, maybe more than people who make eye contact. They're taking that information in. But it has nothing to do with success. It's a cultural construct. In fact, some research recently was fascinating. Native American peoples, they actually, most of them, their cultural expectation is to not make eye contact. They find that deep penetrating look that we espouse to be offensive and dishonoring. So they don't like that, and they never have, but we push that. And I think that we need to start to question those assumptions that we make. Why is it so important to do that? Why is it important? If you have people who have sensitivity to proprioceptive input, touch, texture, why do we demand a good firm handshake when they don't like to make good firm handshakes? I think you could be entirely successful. Yes, and COVID helped things. But you can be entirely successful without having to grip someone's hand firmly.
So your organization, do clients need to pay anything to get services? Are you grant funded to operate? How do you make the bills kind of go?
Well, of course, we're a charitable organization, and any donations are always welcomed and encouraged, because that allows us to fund scholarships for low to no income autistic adults, and there are many out there. So it's tax deductible opportunity for people to support our work. But we have a very modest service fee, which is less than half of what you would find with your traditional therapist and psychiatrist and so on, or even life coaches. So we have a modest service fee that we ask families or individuals many times individuals themselves reach out to us, and you don't find that family reaching out for them. So a variety of means, service fee, and then also charitable donations are welcome. So
right. So clients come to you, you begin to work with them. How long does this engagement last?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there's so much variety there. Partly because we don't have this formulaic approach. You're going to do the following things, and then you'll sort of graduate. We have worked with clients for 2 to 3 months.
Mhm.
And we consider it to be, you know, our organization pictures us as true guides.
Mhm.
We don't drag people, we don't push them. We walk alongside them. We're constantly doing that that encouragement on their own journey. So we've had people. I have a client that we've worked with for 2.5 years, and we've seen tremendous change. But it's all variable, and it's based on that unique individual.
Sure.
We get. I can recall conversations with parents where, you know, we have this meeting and the parents say, "Hey, you know, they have a great job now that fits them perfectly. They're socially connected. They are now leaving the house, you know, so that you don't have the child in the basement for the next 30 years. They're leaving the house. They have their own place." Those conversations are that moment, that doorway where I say, it sounds like the journey is going well. So let's part at this point, and you know, we'll be here if you need us later as a resource, as a guide. But that's a great moment, and my mind floods with some of those stories where I've seen that happen. And don't get me tearing up here, but I've seen it happen. Yeah. Now, we also have had failures.
Right.
You know, there have been times when we've worked with clients where it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's a small number, but it happens.
Right.
Hopefully, we've been able to at the very least provide some source of encouragement and resource to the clients and to parents.
Right. And I think that's the bottom line. And I've seen this in a lot of programs, whether it's technology solutions or therapies or even medication. It's a supplement. It's not a cure. It's a supplement to aid them, and it worked for some people, and it may not work for others as well. But it's good to know that resource is there. One last thing I wanted to kind of leave you with is thought, and I'm sure you're aware of it, but I'm beginning to see big companies have a neurodivergent specialist, like a sustainability specialist or a recycling specialist. They have a neurodivergent specialist embedded in the company to help with just what you're saying, which is help adults acclimate to the work life, or help them in the bureaucracy of it. Have you seen that? Do you work with any of those companies or aware of any?
Oh yeah, in fact, I'm a consultant for a tech company called Ultranauts. Ultranauts is an amazing company. They're bleeding edge in what they're doing, because approximately 70% of their workforce is on the spectrum, neurodivergent. So I work each week with those staff members, employees. They call them team members. Right. And I have a lot of conversation and discourse with other companies. It is happening. It's happening more and more often. And I do some consultancy work with those companies. What we've seen in the past is this effort from large companies, especially tech companies early on, and this is 5 and 6 years ago even, where they rushed out with this idea of autism at work.
Right.
And unfortunately, and that things are changing, but unfortunately what happened is they took that deficit model, right, we talked about, and they buffed it up and polished it up, and they created more compartments and more sort of supervisors, you know, people that watched autistic people do their thing in these small boxes and compartments. And that is now being flipped over, that model. So I'm encouraged about that. I'm encouraged to be a part of that. And, you know, for anyone who would love to know more about what we call the neurodiversity movement, or this new approach to working with autistic persons, you know, we invite the connection.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much, David Hall, for your insights, for your work, for your passion for this community, and for all the sacrifices that clearly you have made in this journey. You're not alone. I'm right there with you. And I want to make sure companies do hire more neurodivergent people and do begin to move towards including this diverse community in the workforce. So important, so overlooked, so long abandoned and ignored, but it is a part of our society. This is important and vital as any other community. So the more we can share our story, just like on this podcast, I think the more it is for our community to benefit from and learn from. It's, you know, as a friend of mine said, it's progress, not perfection. And that's all we're hoping for.
Exactly.
So David Hall, thank you for joining us. Please come back soon, stay in touch, and we'll be sure to put all of your contact info in the post.
Great, thank you.